On July 29, 1958, U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower ratified the National Aeronautics and Space Law, giving birth to National Aeronautics and Space Administration, abbreviated as NASA. From that opens a new chapter for conquering the universe. Let's explore it together now. NASA is the United States federal government agency responsible for the implementation of space exploration and aeronautical research. President Dwight D. Eisenhower founded NASA with a civilian purpose toward peaceful applications in space science. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration Act was passed on July 29, 1958, dissolving the predecessor agency of NASA, the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA. NASA officially came into operation on October 1, 1958 at its headquarters in Washington, D.C., with the mission of reaching new heights, uncovering mysteries so that all actions and knowledge can benefit. Good for mankind. Since then, most space exploration missions have been undertaken by NASA, including the Apollo moon landing mission, the Skylab space station, and the Space Shuttle program. Currently, NASA is involved in the construction and operation of the International Space Station ISS and is overseeing the development of the Orion spacecraft. The agency is also responsible for the Launch Services Program, LSP, which oversees and manages NASA's unmanned spacecraft launch activities. 6 decades have passed. NASA deserves to be the world's leader in the field of space research and conquest. Currently, this agency has more than 10 centers scattered across the U.S. with a huge budget of $19.5 billion per year. NASA's science goals focus on understanding the Earth through the Earth Observation System program, studying the physics of the Sun, exploring the celestial bodies in the solar system with advanced robotic spacecraft such as New Horizons, and research topics in astrophysics, such as those related to the Big Bang, through the development of large space research instruments and other associated programs. In the 50s and 60s of the last century, the world witnessed a fierce space race between the two superpowers of the Cold War. Both the Soviet Union and the United States wanted to get ahead of their opponents, dominate space, thereby asserting national power. In October 1957, the Soviet Union put the United States before a technological challenge with the successful launch of the artificial satellite Sputnik 1. And then Sputnik 2 carrying the dog Laika, becoming the first country to put an object in Earth orbit. Rapidly launching space missions, in its first program, Mercury, NASA aimed for manned space flights. But again, the Russians got ahead before cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin flew into space on the Vostok 1 spacecraft on April 12, 1961. The Americans responded modestly to the flight of astronaut Alan Shepard on May 5, 1961. This flight only lasted 15 minutes and 22 seconds, so the ship could not fly all around the globe. 20 days later, U.S. President John F. Kennedy set out ambitions. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard, because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win, and the others, too. President John Kennedy's proclamation was the kickstarter of the journey into space with the Apollo space project. The project is NASA's highest effort, costing $25 billion, and in its peak period employing 400,000 people, ushering in a brilliant development period for NASA. Since 2011, NASA has outlined strategic goals: expand and sustain manned operational missions in the solar system, expand scientific understanding of the Earth and the universe, create new space technologies, and promote aeronautical research. NASA continues research projects including surveying Mars, Mars 2020 and InSight, Jupiter, Saturn, and studying the Earth and the Sun. Ongoing missions include Juno orbiting Jupiter, Cassini orbiting Saturn, New Horizons, passing Jupiter, Pluto, and Dawn studying the dwarf planet. For a long time, the ambition to conquer Mars has always been NASA's #1 mission. The desire to conquer the red planet has helped experts here draft a plan called Journey to Mars, sending people to Mars by 2030. Humanity's dream of conquering the Sun is also gradually becoming a reality when NASA announced that it would send the Parker Solar unmanned spacecraft straight into the atmosphere surrounding the Fireball, also known as the Fireball. The corona of the Sun, at the closest distance in aerospace history, is expected to be launched into space on July 31, 2018 from Kennedy Space Center in Florida, USA. Scientists believe Parker Solar will transmit valuable data back to Earth to help study why the Sun's atmosphere is so hot. In addition to expanding our knowledge of the planets, the information provided by the Sun mission also improves our ability to predict solar storms and space climate events that could affect our lives. The cost of NASA's mission to conquer the Sun is currently up to $1.5 billion. This is considered a great step forward of NASA in particular and of humanity in general in the aspiration of immense space exploration. Here's a look at the 5 greatest scientific achievements in history from NASA. The Chandra telescope was launched into space in the second half of 1999 and is an instrument that plays an important role in NASA's space mission. During its 15 years of operation, Chandra has provided humanity with a unique panoramic view of the universe. In 1961, from Cape Canaveral of Florida, Lieutenant Colonel Alan Bartlett Shepard Jr. was launched into space aboard Freedom 7, becoming the first American astronaut to fly into space. And the suborbital flight, which lasted 15 minutes and reached 116 miles into the atmosphere, turned out to be a major victory for NASA. Since 1998, NASA has also cooperated with Russia, Japan, Canada, and European Space Agency, ESA, member countries to build the International Space Station, ISS. The ISS project builds the largest man-made object in orbit to create a space station and work for astronauts. Construction of the International Space Station, ISS, started in 1998 and was in use since 2000 by researchers. The first crew set foot on the station in 2000 and since then they have lived there. This is for space research and exploration. NASA and partners from around the world officially completed the entire construction of the International Space Station in 2011. Astronomers have had to work to figure out how to live in zero gravity and beyond to complete the future mission of sending humans to the Moon and Mars. Apollo 11 – The Great Leap for Mankind. The Apollo 11 space shuttle became the first successful mission to send a man to the Moon. On July 16, 1969, Apollo 11 was launched into space carrying 3 American astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin and Mick Collins, on a mission to travel to Earth's only satellite. The spacecraft reached the Moon's orbit on July 20, 1969, and a day later, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin set foot in an area known as the Silent Sea and began to explore and photograph the surface. The trip marked a great achievement when man first set foot on a distant planet, full of mystery and poetic from the perspective of the literary world, as well as the passion and discovery desire of astrophile. With that in mind, the words of astronaut Neil Armstrong when he took the first step on the surface of the Moon went down in history. That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. Until December 1972, the U.S. successfully landed 5 more times on the Moon, bringing 12 NASA astronauts down to Earth's satellite. The success of Project Apollo opened the door for the U.S. and the Soviet Union to work together on the first international flight into space. It was the Apollo-Soyuz test project, conducted in July 1975. An American Apollo spacecraft carrying 3 astronauts has successfully merged with the Soviet Soyuz spacecraft carrying 2 astronauts in orbit. On April 11, 1970, the Apollo 13 spacecraft was launched, and after 55 hours and 55 minutes, a terrible explosion occurred, destroying almost the entire system as well as the equipment necessary to maintain life on board. The horrifying incident began when one of the train's engines stopped working within 2 minutes of takeoff. One of the oxygen tanks exploded, and the force of the explosion caused the second oxygen tank to burst. Soon after, 2 of the spacecraft's 3 fuel tanks shut down. This means that all the oxygen stored on Apollo 13 has leaked into space, and all basic support for life such as electricity, water, light, temperature and oxygen has ceased. This disaster marked one of the greatest collective rescues in human history. People thought of the tragic possibilities that could happen, but in the end a miracle happened. The fact that the crew members James Lovell, Fred Hayes and John Swirjet all survived is considered a miracle. On the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the completion of the Apollo 11 mission, in a speech at Kennedy Space Center, KSC, on July 20, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence announced the plan to land on the Moon. NASA's next mission aboard Orion, scheduled for 2024. Mike Pence also reaffirmed his plan to return and maintain a human presence on the Moon in the years to come. He said American astronauts will return to the Moon aboard Orion. We will spend weeks on the surface of the Moon. This time, we will stay there. According to NASA, this is part of a program named Artemis, named after the goddess of the hunt in Greek mythology, to build a permanent human presence on the surface and around the Moon. The main goal of the Artemis program is to build a stable presence on the Moon, in addition to designing a space station orbiting this Earth satellite to turn it into a transfer station, laying the groundwork for the trip to Mars in the future. Thank you for watching today's video. If you find this video good, please like, share and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support ASK Pop Entertainment to make more interesting videos.